Okay, so I saw this on Twitter. Megan Thee Stallion's new album recently came out, and so 64,000 units, 62.67 million on-demand streams, and she got 16,000 pure sales. And someone quote retweeted and said, "Imagine thinking going number 3 on Billboard 200 is a bad thing. Please abolish Gen culture immediately." And I definitely agree because she was catching some flack for this. Some people felt like she would have sold more units and stuff like that. I even had a friend who was like, basically the sales are kind of disappointing, and they felt like if you get like 100K or more, like that's a good week. If not, then it's kind of like a flop. You kind of underperformed. And so I just really wanted to talk about album sales, how they have changed in general. I wanted to share some examples of artists who, have sold well, some artists who haven't, and all that stuff, because album sales now are not the same way that they were 10, 15, 30 years ago. And so here's a comparison to Traumazine for those wondering. Traumazine's 63K first week, 85 million on demand, and 8,000 pure sales. So she doubled her pure sales, and she did well with that. And then here is going to be some of the touring data that I was able to find, outselling Madison Square Garden, which is a hard thing to do, and an arena in Baltimore. The fact that she's selling out arenas, I mean, that's no small feat, so I want to give her 10s for that. So my thoughts on Megan Thee Stallion's first week, I mean, I honestly think it was decent for her. It was decent for her. And so a lot of people kind of feel like, maybe her image is bigger than her as an artist. And, I feel like that can be the case for a lot of people. I mean, the music's still selling. People still like the music. People are going to see the music live. And I feel like the live stats are definitely a good benchmark because a lot of people can't even outsell, a few thousand people to come, let alone an arena. A lot of artists can't even do arenas now. Very few can do stadiums at this point. So, I mean, number 3 on Billboard, I think that that's nothing to scoff at. I think that that's a decent debut overall. And so I'm good with it. Now on to some other albums, how they performed, and me kind of talking about Billboard 200 as a whole. So this is Doja Cat's most recent effort, Scarlet. So she debuted at number 4 on Billboard 200 with 72 album equivalent units and only 6,000 pure album sales. And so yes, it's worth to note that she was up to her eyes in controversy during this era that, was her fault. So I think that's part of why people didn't listen to the album, people didn't buy the album. I know that was the reason that I didn't really tap in with. So that's a comparison to a contemporary, if you will, a fellow rapper. Here's an album that came out this past year. Billieeilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft, 339,000 and 193.93 million on-demand streams, 191,000 pure sales. And that's very impressive. I don't know. Whenever I saw the numbers at this, I was shocked. I mean, I know Billie Eilish is huge. I know she has a fan base. But, I mean, she did very well for herself. And so, I mean, that's nothing to scoff at. I also got to give Olivia Rodrigo her 10s as well, because with her sophomore album, she outsold Sour. And Sour is just amazing in terms of the streams and how well that did. But, she's a younger artist who is able to do really well in pure sales and also selling at tours and all that stuff. And I made a whole video on why I think she's successful. I'll link it below. Ariana Grande's new album, Eternal Sunshine, 227,000 and 194 million on-demand streams, 77,000 pure sales. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is decent for Ariana. I think that she does okay on Billboard 200. She tends to do better on Billboard Hot 100. So for another number 1 album, I was pleased. It definitely had sold positions because that was like 174K, and she almost got blocked from number 1 according to the streets. This is Casey Musgrave's most recent album, Deeper Well, 97,000, 38 million on-demand streams, 66,000 pure sales, another number 2 album. I really enjoyed this album, and I think that she did well with it. Justin Timberlake's new album, Everything I Thought It Was, 67,000 first week, 31 million on-demand streams, 41,000 pure sales. So for him, this was a flop, because his last album was number 1, did well for itself, and I actually think that this is the better album, let me tell it, but the public imaging took, a lot, and then also his entire thing of the way that they promoted the album. But I mean, for him, it was a flop. Another album that flopped, camillacabello, CXOXO, debuts at 13 on this week's Billboard 200, 36,000 units. When I talk about flop in the current day, this is what I'm talking about. This is absolutely a flop. Absolutely a flop. 36,000 units. Again, the public imaging, the racism, yeah, took a beating. And so, yeah, that's that. Another established artist, Beyonce, with over 400,000 first week. And Taylor Swift did over 2.6 million. And then here is Dualipa's album, 83,000. And I think I predicted somewhere in this ballpark. And so, I mean, she did well with it, 39.7 million on demand, 51,000 pure sales. Like I said, I don't care for the album, but I mean, I gotta give 10s where 10s are due, because she outsold Future Nostalgia first week in the US. And 21 Savage's new album, he had 133K first week, over 100 million on-demand streams, and just 4,000 pure sales. charlixcx with her new album, Brat, another number 3 debut, 82,000 first week, 46.72 million on-demand streams, 45,000 pure sales. So yeah, this has kind of been a little cultural moment. Like, everyone's having a brat summer, everyone's loving it. So I mean, this did really well for her. Okay, so this one was a few years ago, but Harry Styles' last album, Harry's House, this was crazy. 521,500 units overall, 246.96 million on-demand streams, and 330,000 pure sales. And this is impressive to me because this is whenever they decided to take away all the bundling. Like, artists used to sell like a sweatshirt and then they would bundle the album with it, and so they took that away. So I mean, what Harry was able to do, yeah, he ate. Taylor Swift sales first week for Evermore, 329k. So basically this is kind of a flop for her, but I mean, overall this is whenever they changed the sales, so you couldn't have the bundles anymore, like I just discussed. So the album before this, Folklore, 846k, Evermore, 329k. And so I'm pretty sure that they reversed this decision, because during this time, artist sales were not looking good for albums without the bundles. They really were not. I don't think that the bundles should be included with the albums, just because, like, I don't think that you should be able to just buy a hoodie and then the album comes with it. Like, I feel like it's like you actually buying the album. And artists have been doing this. Like, Prince did this whenever he released Musicology. Like, he gave them away with tour tickets. And so artists are going to find a way to do that and everything. But it's kind of crazy that this is a flop for Taylor Swift. But I mean, she has a fan base that goes out and buys the album. Also, we got to mention how there would be times where artists would just discount their album so people would buy it. I'm pretty sure Lady Gaga discounted Born This Way to, what, 99 cents or something like that, to kind of get the sales up. Some artists release multiple versions of albums, looking right at Taylor Swift and what she's doing with Torture Poets Department. I made a video about that. I'll link it below if you'd like to watch it. So yeah, I think artists have multiple ways to kind of sell albums. And so I just showed all those examples to kind of show you where the musical landscape is today. So here's how album sales used to kind of be back in the 90s. So Mariah Carey, Rainbow is an example that came to me. 323,000 units sold first week, her highest career sales at that point. And she still couldn't get number one. She was barred by Rage Against the Machine, right? And then in its 8th week, highest weekly sales, 369,000 copies. And that was number 9. That was number 9. Now that's probably easy the number 1 album. Here, Whitney Houston, The Bodyguard, debuted at number 2, 144,500 copies in its first week, and then it kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And then Michael Jackson, Thriller, was amazing at its peak, 1 million a week. 1 million copies of one album in 1 week. So that is me showing you old and new. And it's important to note for the Taylor Swift thing that she released the album, 16 tracks, and then she released another album on top of it, and she still couldn't beat Adele's record. And I don't think Adele's record will ever be broken. I think she sold, 3 million first week. And it's also worth noting that albums didn't used to debut at number 1. They debuted lower, and then eventually they got number 1, and then they stayed there for a while. And the first album to debut at number 1 was some Elton John album, and the first one for a woman was Whitney Houston. Same thing for the Billboard Hot 100 chart as well. And Michael had the first song to debut at number 1 overall, and then Mariah had the first for a woman. And then now a lot of times we're seeing a song or album debuting really high and then it kind of falls off. But there's still examples of albums and songs that kind of debut low and then eventually they kind of gain a shred over time. I think the Glass Animal song, I think that's kind of an example for a song, I believe. And then for albums or songs, another example, I believe her name is Chapel Royan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. But basically, she released her stuff. It didn't do the best at the time, and then now, she's really popping off with some of her songs, and a lot of people are listening to her album, and she's seeing increased sales on Billboard and stuff. So it still does happen now. It just doesn't happen as much as it used to. Something that I wanted to know is whenever I'm looking at the Billboard 200, a lot of these artists, I'm kind of comparing them to what they had done previously and stuff like that. So 300k is a flop for Taylor Swift, but it's not a flop in general. And so kind of just having the context of that, what genre are they making, how big of an artist that they are. So I think having that context is also really important. So in terms of why I think that albums don't sell now the way that they used to 20, 30, 40 years ago, I think that there's multiple reasons for that. So number one, our form of consumption has changed. There used to be buying the vinyl records, CDs got really popular at a point. Radio, I think, meant a lot more back then than it does now. There was a huge emphasis on pure sales, and there's a handful of artists who were able to sell 1 million copies first week, 2 million copies first week. NSYNC was able to do that, No Strings Attached, over 2 million first week. Usher did that with Confessions, and so on. so you're just kind of not going to see those numbers anymore. Or even albums like Mariah Carey Music Box that have over 28 million worldwide now. It's just not going to happen now with the change in formats and just the way that we buy. And with the rise of Napster and music streaming, we started to see a shift there and everything, because a lot of people now are going to use Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Amazon, whatever. Then there's also a thing of using YouTube. Some people are still on that. Or also like Twitter or TikTok, for example. Like if I want to hear like a new song someone's released, but I don't want to give them a stream, I go to one of those two platforms because people are going to post a snippet of that. So I think that that's also a part of it as well. A lot of people are really big on streaming and just not buying physical albums anymore. I do it sometimes for artists I really like I'll buy a vinyl or a CD sometimes, or some people are still really into digital. And so I have a whole video on the kind of change, and I'll link that down below as well. And so that was a moment there. And a lot of people feel like it's going to be in my phone, so I might as well just listen to it that way instead of physically buying it. Like, the convenience is unmatched. You can listen to an album at the gym, driving somewhere, no matter what you're doing, as long as you have your phone. So that convenience can't really be beat. But another thing, labels aren't promoting artists like they used to in terms of getting them out there for live performances. The media training is lackluster. We don't have a whole lot of superstars. There used to be Mariah and Janet and Whitney and Michael all popping off at the same time. We don't really have that now. We have 2 or 3 people popping off, and then everybody else is kind of at the bottom. You know, it's just really changed in regards to that. And I feel like people aren't really utilizing their teams well, their social media team, to get people to buy albums, to get people to want to see them do a live performance. And I think all that kind of bleeds in now. And so I have some albums I like, but if I can just stream it 90% of the time, that is what I am going to do. Not to mention the quality of the music has definitely gone downhill, in my opinion, from the past. And I just think that there's a lot in this bigger picture, essentially. You know, for me, 40K or less is basically a flop. But like I said, it also depends on the context of what you've done as an artist, what you've sold, and all those things. But I mean, I kind of just take it on a case-by-case basis most of the time. So I think that there is so much that kind of goes into an artist being successful and all those things. Of course, we have album sales and we have Billboard Hot 100, but there's also the tour sales, the social media engagement, and, you know, brand deals and album promotion by the label and all those things. Like, there's a lot of things going into it. So yes, this is part of it, but it's not the end all be all. I like to see my favorite artists do well on Billboard Hot 100 and Billboard 200, but that's not the end all be all for me. There's plenty of artists that I like, and they don't have the biggest sales, but I like the music. And I also think that some artists, they definitely got to the point where they're just trying to make music for TikTok, make music to have a little hit, and I think that that's a problem for it as well. Katy Perry's new era fell on deaf ears because you're working with a rapist, number one, and it doesn't work for what she's carved out for herself as an artist. I made a video on that. I'll link it below if you would like to watch it. And I think that there's been some albums that were number one that we don't really talk about. MGK was number one. Nobody really talks about that album because it wasn't really worth talking about. So some albums, they don't even hit number one. Maybe they're not even top 10, but they become a cultural phenomenon and people still really enjoy it. So I think that there's a lot that kind of goes into that. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And let's continue that conversation.